Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where it's about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season finale of Briarpatch. A great season finale. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, we see, Allegra, enact her plan. And I like how the episode is structured where you see her like explaining what she's going to do to AD while also kind of enacting it. I like how it kind of cuts back and forth in certain regards. But it's like, it's nice how it was all constructed, how Allegra set up the chessboard and moved piece by piece. Because the first step was talking to Jake about it. It's like, oh, here's this recording. And Jake is like, oh yeah, we can take down Ramirez in there, or at least we can use this to kind of get our freedom, get everything that we want. He can finally get everything that he wants, and Allegra can get free and stuff like that. But she's like, no, we're going to trade this for Jean. And it's like, wait, what? And it's like, we're going to trade it to the one person. And he's like, no. And she's like, yeah, we're going to trade it to Brado. He's like, no, like that bastard doesn't deserve to win. But she's like, it's for me, And Jake's like, basically he's super reluctant, but like fine. And it's like, okay, so we need someone to help us get to we need to basically tell Eve this whole plan is off. And it's like, don't tell her anything. But even Allegra accounted for that, because she's like, Jake is Jake, he can't help himself. So it's just like, of course he's going to go way above and beyond of what he's supposed to say. So it's like, yeah, Allegra's plan, what she's up to and stuff like that. So, and the fact is Allegra accounted for that because Jake is who he is. He's a big chatterbox. So, and obviously that sets other things in motions, because like, well, for one, Eve starts planning stuff out for herself to be like, okay, so that's how this is and everything. Because she's saying like that whole water park idea that Jake had would have just been kind of like issues later on down the line. It's like she kind of played along with the idea because it's like, oh, that's what you want. But truth be told, that's not, that would have just been issues upon itself. So, she kind of set stuff in motion. She ends up meeting up with Jean, which she was like, she's kind of making some backdoor dealings herself and stuff like that, because Allegra knows that Jean's still in town, because it's like literally everyone is in town that he blames for basically ruining him, even though it was 100% his own fault. Once again, I still don't understand like how you want to get it twisted to think that I still don't get how you are so delusional he believes he's the good guy. I don't get it. Maybe once upon a time you were a good cop, and it seems like the way things are implied, even the way Clyde talks about it, it's like, oh, you haven't been a good cop for a long time because you were a dirty cop because you were in debt to the mob. You're a dirty cop now because you're in debt to Clyde because you were in debt to the mob. So it's a whole situation. But nevertheless, at the same time, you had that whole situation between Sydney and Clyde, because Sydney has constantly been like, look what they did to Harley. The fact of the matter is we can just go. You got your list. Like, you got this whole Ramirez thing set up. It's like, you don't need this. But Clyde is who he is. And I think he had turned down a good challenge, I think. But also, it's just because it's like, no. I kind of need to sweep the board. I need to win. This could be, the ace, that kind of keeps me on, top dog. Like, he needs kind of everything in order, and basically kind of chew Sydney out by being like, hey, the fact of the matter is you are replaceable. So yes, I am sentimental because I keep you around, because honestly it would take too much to basically bring in some other idiot to be my right hand, essentially. And I won't lie to you, the entire time I was like, is Sydney going to kill him? But to be fair, it's a situation of no one that's like that to Brad would ever kill him necessarily. I know, ironic, we'll get to that soon enough. But I guess they're kind of like beaten down of like, oh yeah, we love you, we hate you, yet love you, so we can't do anything. Like, Jake can never end up killing Brado. So I think the same thing applied in Sydney's case. But I just kept almost halfway expecting him just at some point while he was talking, at some point while Brado was talking, I expected Sydney to kill him to get back at him. It's like, it never happened. I was like, that really surprised me, because I was legitimately halfway expecting it every time. I was like, is he gonna get, well, never mind. It didn't go down the way I thought it did. But nevertheless. Then Allegra talks to Freddie, because it turns out Freddie knew the entire time what was really going down. He just didn't say anything because Strucker getting, blown up, it's what kind of made Freddie go, oh shit, I can't print or say anything that I know, because Strucker was his inside source. So that's what, once again, Strucker's, his explosion was meant to divert attention away from Felicity's murder. It's like they're tied together, but it was also meant to make it seem like, oh, like this is a complete, it's unrelated, it's connected yet unrelated. Like, because if it just seems like, oh, because it's supposed to make it seem like there is just one particular person coming after both people, when in actuality it was two different people, kind of for similar reasons, and everything. It's quite, fascinating when you actually kind of break it down. But Freddie was like, the fact is that he couldn't print this story, like, because the Staghorns wouldn't let him. But then she's kind of, the way Allegra is kind of implying, it makes me wonder, is it because basically this story is going to be so damn big that even they can't keep this? Because I expected to kind of see them this episode, the Staghorns, senior and junior, because like they're kind of connected to all this. Because Eve makes some money moves and ends up getting Tony out of there because of some super nasty shit that he's done. And she's like, yeah, but you the fact is, I forgot what Eve was saying. She was basically like, I'm the most dangerous thing, a lady with a job, and I'm damn good at it. And it's like, she kind of turned this whole situation around in her favor. So Tony's out of there. And obviously, like, the fact is, it's so interesting in the grand scheme of things how, Eve and Jean are actually kind of very similar. And it seems like they both like to pretend like they're the good guy in this situation, when in actuality, they're not. But we'll get to that soon enough. But like I was saying, I guess just because the story is so big that even the Staghorns wouldn't be able to cover it up is kind of why I'm wondering, because Allegra is like, it's kind of up to you, Chuckles, deciding what you end up doing with the story. So when the time comes for the meet, it's like Jake is there, Allegra is there, Clyde is there, and it turns into a whole thing. It's like, oh yeah, like, and it's kind of sad because Clyde is still kind of berating Jake a little bit, just kind of, he's still got that little hold over him, because it's like, oh yeah, suicides, you were so good at writing those suicide notes, like making things look like a suicide, is kind of what Clyde was implying. But what was really interesting is when, because it's like, all right, we struck the deal and everything. So when it's all said and done, I'm going to, it's going to be hard to get, Gene here. But it's like, bam, he shows up and kills, or rather just shoots Sydney. And I'm like, oh, okay. And he's coming up and Clyde's like, all right, come on, let's talk. And then he shoots Clyde. I was like, oh, so that's, okay, that's taken care of. I was like, oh, wasn't really expecting that. But once again, they're pleading this case. Like, the fact of the matter is, that wasn't the woman I love. Like, don't you realize I was trying to hold on to the memory of Felicity, like the woman, I loved her and everything, blah, 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 blah. Because it's interesting, because I had skipped over it, but there's a whole situation with AD meeting with Lucretia, and we kind of got an understanding of like why she did what she did. Like, basically, it's like, because I had thrown that out there before. I was like, oh, was it last episode, I want to say? That was kind of under the impression. I was like, oh, maybe Lucretia wasn't the one that pulled the trigger. Maybe Jean's actually the one who did it, and she handed him the gun. That Jean handed her the gun to make it seem like she did it, so it wouldn't fall back on her. But it's like, no, Lucretia did pull the trigger. But it's like, she moved here because Jean wanted like a fresh start. She's like, we could kind of start a new life. We could even have a family. But the fact of the matter is, that's not what happened. Like, the moment they got here, what did he do? He ended up being with, someone else. But basically, her daddy taught her something like, you can survive anything. And she's like, that's a mess up thing to kind of tell someone as a kid. Because I guess for her, I think the thought process behind that is like, the fact is, if you say that, that means you're telling someone that they need to kind of like almost kind of take things in strides of like, no matter how bad something happens, you'll survive it. And I guess because of that mentality, she kind of just stuck around regardless of just how hurt she was. But obviously, Gene's just being the piece of shit that he was, just kind of like kept her kind of like in a state of just being, I don't know whether he legitimately had her, well, because she was on medication and stuff like that, so I'm assuming he's the one that set that up to kind of keep her a little like loopy and, I guess a little more under his control, I guess. And it's like, it's like, but, AD's like, he's the one that killed Felicity and everything. It's like, if you let us know what we need to know, we can make sure that he goes down. So, kind of circling back, I do apologize. I'm a little all over the place. But when it comes to the whole situation with Jean trying to spin that to be like, yeah, I had to, like, almost, you're explaining to Allegra almost like, no, I had to kill your sister. Don't you realize? She wasn't Felicity. She might have looked like Felicity, but she wasn't Felicity I knew and loved. It's like, no, Felicity saw you for what and who you really are. And, it's like you didn't want to get caught. That's what this was about. Don't try and make it seem like you had some noble cause. He's like, yeah, but I'm a good person. And he gets shot. And it turns out Jake shot him. And the Allegra was like, you had no right. He's like, that way you didn't have to be the one to basically carry the burden. But she was like, this was mine. You had no right to do that. Because I'm curious, like, what Allegra was going to do. That was the big thing. I mean, that was the whole thing last episode of, like, what she was going to do. Like, did she... I mean, because there's certain things in this plan I'm wondering. I think there's no way you can account for everything. Because I don't think she expected things to kind of play out necessarily like this. But it kind of put all the right people in the right room at the same time. But I don't know if it's necessarily the way she kind of, expected things to kind of flow. But it's like, when the time come, would she have pulled the trigger on Jean herself? I don't know. Maybe. At the end of the day, we'll never know now. But then you have Eve show up. And obviously Eve puts him down, wipes off Jake's fingerprints. Make sure that her fingerprints are on it, and then puts the gun in Clyde's hand to make it seem like, oh, it was a back and forth, like he shot Clyde shot him type of thing, and they both died. And it's like, and Allegra has a sit down with Eve, and we break down everything, how this whole thing has been Eve's game. Like, Jake thought, like, oh, this was their thing, they had their plan. It's like, no, Eve's always, and because Allegra ended up bringing up some interesting stuff, because it turns out, like, obviously, like, she's the second bomber and everything, but it's like, I completely forgot about it until Allegra brought it up. She's like, oh yeah, like, your military history. I was like, right. We learned that, like, a couple episodes back that Eve had a military history. Like, because she gave Freddy that file on Eve, but I could never make heads or tails of what that was supposed to mean. It was basically because she, in the military, she dealt with ordnance, so meaning that she was someone with the experience of capable of creating a bomb. Basically, she got rid of Strucker because she was covering up for Jean, because she's known what Jean has been for a long time. Sadly, Jean just didn't see Eve for who she really was. That basically this has been her long game. Like, basically, she needed Jean to stay in play because she needed Jean to keep failing at killing Spivey, because I guess she knew, like, oh, you keep bumbling it, and if you're alive long enough to keep bumbling it, eventually Brattle would have to come to town to deal with Jake himself, and he did, because all of this is about, hey, the recognition she'd get from taking down Brattle. And it's like, wow, that's so interesting. I mean, that's why I'm like, she wants to pretend like she's a good guy, but it's like, you have very, like, you're not all that altruistic. I mean, maybe you are misguided in believing, like, oh, I can do so much good for this town. Because for her, what was it? It was like, your sister was under the impression, like, basically that this town needed to kind of be bathed. It needed, essentially, it wasn't her, it wasn't the full phrasing, but basically it was almost like a holy fire. It needed to be completely a cleanse, like a flame cleanse, to kind of get rid of all the gunk that is this town. And I guess she considered all of this to be her cleansing flame type of situation. I thought was kind of interesting. So it's like, she, in the long run, much like Jean, thought she was doing the, it's like, oh, I'm doing a good thing. But like for Allegra, it's like, you didn't actually love my sister, because if you did, you wouldn't have done all this. You wouldn't have protected her killer. But at the same time, Jake is like, oh, I'm not the one. He's like trying to explain, Allegra, I had no idea about this. And she's like, of course you didn't, because you never ask questions. You're always so busy trying to, do your own thing. You never bother asking questions, in this regard. So it's like, basically, it does kind of fall on Jake to a certain extent. So, and when it's all said and done, Eve is like, we could all win, which obviously, Jake is like, no, don't let her win. But then it's like, for Allegra, it's like, both of you failed my sister. You both try to pretend like you care about Felicity, but both of you are responsible for what happened to her. So here it is. You can both decide what happens. And I was almost wanting to give hope to Jake. I was like, maybe Jake won't. Maybe he will prove himself worthy and be like, oh, I'm not going through. oh, never mind, him and Eve are literally fighting over it, and she walks away, and we look and see, oh, Sydney's not dead. I was like, okay, even, I mean, it was like, okay, so it's like, what's that plot point going to turn into? But nevertheless, Eve comes out victorious. She's got recording and everything. She's like, yeah. Looks inside her car. She sees a can of the drinks that, what's his face? Gene drinks, and she's like, no, and the car explodes. I was like, oh, a middle finger from the grave. Once again, these two very bad. It's interesting how literally the three extremely bad people in this situation basically took each other out. I mean, to be fair, she had a gun in her fridge expecting to kill Gene if he didn't really go along with her plan. I guess she was going to go about things a little differently if it came down to it and she had to take him out. But it's like he ends up, and we even see that he died with a smile on his face. So I'm sure in some sick, twisted way, he's like, I'm the good guy. I'm the good. Yeah. It's like, no, you're not, you know? So it's like, so they walk away from that situation. Then there's the whole thing with Cyrus, you know, for for Allegra, it's like, I'm done working for you. Like, the game is over. I have a copy of the recording. The fact of the matter is, if Ramirez ever comes after me, you or anyone working for him comes after me, it's not going to be good when this goes public. So it's like, leave me alone. That's all I want. And he's like, good game. She's like, I'm done playing games, Cyrus. I quit. And kind of walks away. Because that's all she wants from this situation, is just to be able to be free. So there's that situation. As she was about to leave her room, lo and behold, what happens? She gets attacked by Sydney. I was like, okay, so this is where this is going, because he's blaming, like, oh, these are the people I cared about because of, like, that control Clyde has on him, and, like, even beyond his death, it's like he's free. You're free of his grasp and everything, but it's like he's still someone you cared about. Plus, Harley was a friend, and it's like, oh, this is all your fault. I was like, how's this going to go? And we hear the roar. I was like, the fucking tiger. We haven't seen it since the first episode. And it's like, well, we never actually got to see it, right? We only saw its shadow, right? I don't remember. It's been a while, but I was like, the damn tiger. And the moment Allegra's there, standing there, I'm like, well, Allegra, you don't have to be faster than the tiger. All you have to do is be faster than Harley. And Harley proceeded to get ripped apart by the tiger. And I love it. She's checking out. The dude is like, so how'd you enjoy your stay? And she's just standing there with a bloody nose. It's just staring at him and like, really, dude? And it's like, yeah, her entire stay in this town has been nothing but shit, essentially. So that was interesting. Along with all of that, I also do like the fact is that that dude was watching Cindy's cam show and stuff like that. And obviously the send-off between her, Allegra and AD was really nice. I was like, oh, and I was like, hey, I'm glad to be wrong. Because I was like, oh, please. I was hopeful that it wouldn't, I had a feeling it wouldn't be AD, but there was still a part of me that was a little suspicious of him. But it's like, glad to see you weren't a bad guy after all. Especially for Allegra, it's like, you were literally the only friend in this town that Felicity had. Because literally she was kind of surrounded by people she couldn't trust. Couldn't trust Eve, couldn't trust Gene. Because I didn't talk about it, but I thought that was such an interesting thing. Because Felicity knew about Gene's situations at the beginning, because she didn't continue that affair because she wanted to, like, to a certain extent. It's because, like, she got drunk, they had an affair, and then she kind of found out about some of the shady shit that Gene was up to. She went to Eve, and Eve is like the one that was like basically go undercover. It's like, you made her have a fake relationship, which Eve was trying to be like, no. She jumped at the opportunity because obviously, Felicity wanted to do good. She thought like, oh, we're going to expose Gene. We're going to take him down. He's a bad guy. And she, Felicity did whatever she thought she could do to help this town. And she thought, taking down Gene would do that, not realizing Eve had her own plans in the grand scheme of things that, sadly, Felicity was just kind of a pawn in the whole situation, so it makes that situation even sad, because at first, you could tell, like I said, during some of the photos, you could tell, like, it made you wonder. So it seems like from the very beginning of the relationship, their entire relationship was based off a lie that she knew from the beginning what kind of person that he was, and the whole relationship was based. So part of me thought, the way they kind of implied it made it seem like she found out after they were already having an affair and stuff like that, but it's like, no, so, but, kind of the last, nail in the coffin to this whole situation, kind of putting it all finally to bed, is a confrontation between Allegra and Jake at the end, because Jake kept hearing the recording over and over again, like what was left, and hearing Felicity's voice. I thought at the end of the day, I was like, okay. So I was like, okay, so is he going to turn himself in? Because the whole thing was beginning with the premise of like, I'm going to have to go to jail for a couple years if we go down with your plan. All right. And so I thought Jake was going to be like going to turn himself in because he's like, oh, this is my penance for me basically playing my part. But then basically it turns out the person, because I kept being like, so was the person she tried to call, was that Eve? It's like, no, the person she called, the one person she believed she could turn to was Jake. The way Allegra was implying it was kind of seeming like they had a relationship, like there was like, it wasn't just like the relationship they had growing up. It's like there was a thing between them, but nevertheless, I mean, not unless I completely misinterpreted what she was saying. Like I could have misunderstood, but it seemed like she was, because she was saying like, yeah, I kind of figured it out. I was like kind of implying like Felicity was the person, Jake was the person that Felicity was kind of really with or whatever. But whatever the case may be, like at the very least, there's something that happened between them. And it's like, she turned to you because you're the one person in this town she can trust. And what did Jake do? He ended up sending, he didn't think it was, his place to get involved. So he ended up sending Eve. So basically, in turn, it basically both directly and indirectly makes Jake responsible for everything turning out the way it did. If you had gone to her like you wanted to, then like she wanted you to, none of this would have happened. Like you could have circumvented Eve, and like none of this could have probably happened. It's because she's like, basically at the end of the day, Jake, you do everything to make yourself seem like the good guy. You've done a lot of bad stuff. At the end of the day, it's like, because he kept being like, it's just you and me. Pick has always been you and me. And she's like, no, it's been all three of us. Because basically both of them kind of admit that basically they only, in their cases, they only saw each other and themselves. They were so focused on their own mess between them as well as with themselves, like they didn't see Felicity, and what happened to her was kind of on both of them. We weren't there for her when she needed us. You in particular, Jake, like, you want to pretend like you're the good guy, but you've known the entire time. Like, you were in contact with Felicity, but you never said anything. And the reason why is because he didn't want to jeopardize his relationship with Allegra, because Allegra's always been so important to him. He's like, everything I do has always been for you. And she's like, no, like everything you've ever done has been for you. For him, he's like, I can't let you walk away with that recording, So it's like, it's a situation, sadly, where Jake, he was so focused on Allegra and himself that he never bothered looking at Felicity. He never really saw her. And, maybe if he had, like, things would be different. And Allegra walks away, And I was so curious, like, there was also a part of me was like, is Jake going to kill himself in this type of situation? But later on, we see him get arrested because literally everything's kind of falling apart, because he ended up learning, like, Eve is the one that had all his documents and stuff like that. All that stuff was signed over to her because of your lawyer and everything. So you've literally walked away with this. Literally, all your plans went down the drain in that moment. We see at the end, he's just waiting in his place because, like, we see the FBI rolling in because, like, the feds are coming for him, and he has it's all been for nothing. Like, everyone walked away a loser in this situation. Like, Eve's dead, Clive's dead, Jean's dead, and now, Jake's going to go to prison. I guess it's almost like, it's justified, because it's also interesting because tying it back to the beginning where Jake was like, oh, come on, like, this is what we wanted. That right there in itself is proof of what Allegra was talking about. Like, she had to be like, this is for me. Not like, no, we want to take down Jean, the one who killed Felicity, remember? Because sadly for, him, it wasn't on his radar, because almost basically meaning that Felicity didn't mean as much to him as she did to Allegra. It's like, the only reason why Felicity mattered, the way it's kind of implying is like, the only reason why Felicity mattered is because she mattered to Allegra, so she inadvertently mattered to Jake. It's that, and it makes that situation even sadder when you break it down like that. It's like, yeah, she kind of feel a little bad for Jake, because you're like, oh, you were hoping like he did some bad stuff, but now it's kind of like, I mean, I wonder, does she take back that statement she said last episode, like, he's made a lot of mistakes, but being my friend isn't one of them. It's like, I wonder, does she feel differently now, after everything, like her eyes being open, because now Brado had said like, oh, you're different, you finally see how the game is played, and but essentially like Candy Bar was saying last episode, her eyes were open, so she sees the game for what it really is, and she kind of played it better than everyone else and basically came out on top. So I like, how, like I said, everything kind of plays out. We see, I don't know what Lucretia's situation was at the end. I don't know whether that's like, oh, like maybe They hooked her up with a good lawyer to kind of help her case, to be like, yeah, Jean was the one kind of responsible for this. It wasn't on her, or maybe she was being manipulated. I don't know how they might spin that. Or maybe that's just supposed to be a thing of like her getting to know, like, hey, Jean's taken care of. He won't get away with everything that he's done. We see AD signing over Felicity's place to Cindy because it's like, oh yeah, someone who deserves it, you know. And even Allegra being like, oh yeah, and like someone who deserves you. So I was wondering, I was like, oh, is there going to be kind of like a AD and Cindy situation? Maybe, but maybe, who knows? And then we see, you know, Freddie typing up his story, you know, to kind of like break all this down. So, but at the very end, we see, you know, Allegra leaving the town and having her cigarette, and she's kind of throwing it out. We also had seen Cyrus burning all that, all the dealings and stuff like that. So once again, showing that they're kind of going their separate ways. So I think there's a part of Cyrus that, I mean, as he said, like, oh, you play the game well. He is impressed, you know, that the fact is that I think there's a part of him that is kind of bummed that she's not around. But also at the same time, it's like, oh, I'm glad you survived and everything. And you kind of came out on top. So I think, I mean, obviously his reaction last episode made it seem like he didn't want things to go down the way it did. But there is a part of me that was kind of hoping we'd get one more confrontation between Allegra and Ramirez. Sadly, that's not the case. But it is definitely going to be interesting to see, would be interesting to see, like, you know, where Allegra's story would, you know, take her next with, you know, all of this. And because she even said it to AD, she was like, for the first time in her life, she didn't know. Because like what I was talking about last episode, like so many people kind of steered her life in a certain direction of like, so she kind of went basically where people kind of pointed her. She was always, like I said, in a back seat of her life. The metaphorical car that is her life. She was always in the back seat. Now she's in the front seat, and it's like, so what do you want to do? And she's like, for the first time, she doesn't know. So, and you know, I thought that was just kind of a nice message as she's kind of leaving the town, like, you know, and I think she kind of did what, you know, Felicity wanted to do. She kind of scraped away all the bad in the town, because she always thought like, oh, this place is haunted, but AD was basically like, the town is basically it's kind of like a reflection of the people. Like the fact is, a town isn't bad, especially if it kind of has people like Felicity, people who are good in it. They kind of, you know, take away some of that nasty stigma to a town, essentially. So it's like, it kind of all kind of worked out in the end. Like what Felicity kind of wanted for the town, it kind of gets in the end. So I thought that was just kind of a nice angle. There is part of me that kind of wished that, you know, I'm about to say Felicity, but AD and Allegra got together, but it's like, no, I think it's like, oh, we're friends type of situation. So I think it was a really nice closing to this story. At the time we were recording this, it still hasn't been announced whether or not Briarpatch is returning for a second season. Obviously, I'd be very curious to see what they do with a second season. I did read like one article, but that was saying like, oh, the show got canceled after like 2 episodes. But the article's from like back in February, I think. And at the same time, I think that's around the time the show moved from Thursdays to Mondays. But at the same time, like every other thing I was reading, it's still unclear whether like there hasn't been an official decision either way. But I'd be interested to see what they do. The show is considered an anthology, so I'm assuming like if it did come back for a second season, it might just do that thing of like it be a completely new cast. It might be kind of like a Sinner type of situation where, because I know this is based on a novel of the same name, and I don't know like whether it's kind of very similar to the Sinner where like the entire first season is the book, and then every preceding season is just kind of its own story, kind of in a similar vein. So maybe like season 2 could be like a new like 10-part mystery type of situation in common, you know, in a similar vein. Maybe not. Maybe we'd see recurring characters, or maybe it'd follow Allegra's story. I don't know. I mean, and it's one of those situations where, like, if they decided, hey, we're going to end the story here, I'm fine with that. If it doesn't get a second season, I'd still love to see what they would do with a second season, but I'm more open with it because it's like, it's a very open and shut story. Like, they told the story that this is basically Allegra's story, but if they want to kind of continue it, kind of showing you like, oh, where she is, maybe reunite her with some of the cast from this season, whether it be like AD, for example, or maybe, like I said, or not, unless they give it a completely different shift where it has like no connection, or maybe it has some connection, maybe like that type of thing. And like in the background, you hear about stuff that went down in this season and like the next season. Like I said, it just depends on how everything plays out. So I'd be interested to see what they do with the second season. If they decided not to give it one, I'd be bummed about it, but it's like they told a complete story, so we got the full story. But I would be really, really interested to honestly see see what they would do with the second season. Like I said, as someone who's never read the book, I don't know if it lends itself to more story or whether all of its story was this entire season. I kind of get the feeling that's the case, but I could be wrong. Like I said, I haven't read the book, so really that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.